Welcome to the latest webinar with 20EA. We've got a fantastic experienced panel with us today. I'd like to introduce everyone to Adam Day, UK lead of EXP, Rowan Waller, who has recently successfully merged his own estate agency brand, Waller's Estate Agents, with College and County, and is now sales director for Oxford. Yep. And our own strategic solutions director, Stuart Ducker.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to having a chat with you guys today about the current state of the market. I think maybe if we start off with you, Stuart, could you give us a little bit of an update as to where we're at with our most recent analysis?
Sure. I mean, the unexciting thing is we're seeing a continuation of what's happened in 2023 so far, really, in terms of the fact that supply has risen a little bit, so the number of new instructions have risen, particularly at the higher levels of property. They've actually gone down at the lower levels. Demand, unfortunately, is 16% down on last year, 9% down on the last normal year, which is 2019. And we're seeing a continuation, although not quite as bad, of price changes being nearly double what they were last year. So it's sort of price reductions at about 87%. The one thing that is slightly different to what we've seen before is that demand side has stayed flat over the course of the last 3 months. And what that means is it's getting a lot closer to 2019. So it appears now, from what we're seeing, that people are perhaps getting used to mortgage rates being as high as they are. And there are maybe even some green shoots, dare I use that phrase. And if you combine that with confidence increasing and, you know, the competition that's now happening in the mortgage market, we're hoping, fingers crossed, that it's going to start improving pretty soon. So that's in terms of sales. On letting side, it continues, and stuff continues not to be affordable or available. So there's a big shortage of stock, and where we're sort of 22% down on 2019. We're actually 6% up on 2022. So the number of to-let properties coming to the marketplace actually increased in the last year, but unfortunately that tends to be at the higher levels. So if you're looking at the rental marketplace today and you want a £800 per calendar month property or less, you've got 95,000 of those less to choose from than you had in 2019. So there you go, that's a summary.
Thanks, Stuart. So I'll take it to you first, Rowan. The word that we've been using throughout the year for the property market has been resilient. Based on what Stuart's just said about perhaps seeing some green shoots in September, is that something that you think is true of what you've seen in the market recently?
I don't know, it's a funny word. Resilient is a funny word. It depends what resilience really means. In terms of the property market carrying on in a functioning way, it's been resilient. So we haven't had anything that's leading it towards a crash in the same way as we had in 2008. So I think often when we're talking to people on the sofa or on the doorstep or whatever it might be, people use the word crash with 2008, 2009 memories in mind. But it was a very different crisis that we had, because it was a credit crisis that stopped people being able to borrow. And I think the difference that we have now is that people can borrow, it's just they don't necessarily want to at the levels that they are, and it becomes an affordability issue rather than an inability issue. So it's resilient in terms of there's a functioning way that people can still find a way to move house. But obviously what's happening and part of the reason that prices are coming down is because, various things, but people are being a little bit more cautious about wanting to spend that money. People are preempting what's happening, because it doesn't matter which commentator you listen to, whether you're listening to a commentator that says the market's falling by 35% or a commentator that says the market's falling by 10% over the next year. The general public are hearing prices are going to be lower, I don't want to pay this price now, and they're trying to get that money off in advance. And that's slowing down the market, or sellers are having to come down to a level that allows that sale to happen. And that's why there's a volume decrease in what we're seeing going into pipelines. So resilient is a strange word, because although therefore we can look at that and think that it's continuing, the market will continue, but actually the knock-on effect for sellers, buyers, and actually agents is a significant difference. I think one of the stats I'd seen was I can't remember what he said, something like a 60% decrease in transactions or something over the course of a year. I can't remember which slide it was, but
I think it's 20%, something like that.
20%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but it was significant enough that you think that translation into what is going through books, for example, and the fees that are being earned, that then drives the businesses that are involved in this property industry that's less resilient.
Thinking about the price aspect, obviously it's something that the media have had a field day for over a year on now. We're going to have a crash, as you say. Property prices are going to drop by up to 30%. I think the sensible commentators are, putting their money on small, like as we are, low single-digit drops. But how do you think, Adam, that has translated into consumer feeling around pricing? So is there a big gap between vendors who are perhaps still pinning their hopes on higher pricing and buyers who think that they can get a deal?
To a degree, but I think if I look at our stats across the country, we're seeing it back to just normal levels. We agreed sales on 63% last month, 65% the month before, and it did start at about 72-73% from listing instruction to sale agreed. And obviously last year was more like 80-85%, which is where the 20% reduction in transactions has come in. Is actually instructions have been maintained fairly level. We've gone up a little bit, we've seen per agent, but the transaction numbers dropping is due to the fact that there's less houses being sale agreed as a percentage compared to a year and a half, 2 years ago, which was extraordinary. We're never going to see that again. Yeah. So I think for me, I look at it and go, well, we're just back to a normal market. We're just back to 65% sale agreed, instruction to sale agreed. I suppose, and maybe I'm jumping ahead in the next question, but possibly the next couple of questions, but my concern mainly is, and exactly what Rowan said, it's an affordability issue. And the more and more people come out of their fixed rate mortgages, you've got people who fixed 18 months ago thinking they'd got one up on the inflation rates and the interest rates and everything else. And actually now they're coming out of their 2-year fixed rate and they're going to be dropping into having to get another mortgage. So there's still a lot of uncertainty to come, in my opinion, over the next 6 to 9 months because of people dropping out of their fixed rate mortgages, going into the new interest rate, that new world, and maybe being forced to sell because they can't afford those payments. Because it is a big jump, and we're not going to see that. Interest rate rises take 18 months to wash through into the market, and that's generally the thing that financiers and financial advisors say is it takes 18 months for that to wash through. And so we haven't seen the impact of those interest rate rises that started happening 13 months ago, was it 14 months ago? So we haven't seen the real impacts. That's my only caveat. The one other thing I would say though, just proving it's back to a normal market, is we measure viewings per sale agreed. I back in 2008-9, and I didn't have as big a business back then, but we were listing 150, 180 properties a month, so we had a fairly good steer of what was going on in the market, and that was up to about 15, 16 viewings per sale. We're seeing at the moment, and back in 2021 after COVID, that was down at 8 viewings per sale. Ridiculously low numbers. We're now up at 11.5 viewings per sale, so that's gone up. It's still not gone up to panic button levels. I'm not pressing the panic button, but it's going up. It is creeping up. So again, just little measures like that we look at and start thinking, well, we need to keep an eye on this. But I agree with everyone. It's just a normal market right now.
I think that's a funny, just about normal markets. We talk about normal markets, and stat-wise and percentage-wise, I totally agree. But often we talk about normal market and referring back to 2019. And I think we're 16% lower than 2019. I think that might have been the stat I'm remembering.
9 or
you give me a lot of stats to try and take in.
It's fine.
But 16% lower than 2019. 2019 to me didn't feel like a normal market. I think we were knackered by Brexit in 2019, and we seem to have forgotten that was a tough market to be in. And actually 2018 as well. 2018 through 2019, with that level of uncertainty going on, caused a lack of transactions to go through. In fact, I think when we came off that election in 2019, and then into 2020, we sold half the number of properties in January and February, half the number of properties we had in the whole of 2019 within a 2-month period, and then obviously got knackered by COVID. But that put the breakers on it until we exploded out of COVID, and that's why 2021 was such an extraordinary year. But I think when we're talking about 2019 being a normal market, and we're not very far off a normal market, we're just 16% lower than what a normal market was. Well, actually, 16% lower than what I thought wasn't a normal market is probably 25% lower than a normal market.
Okay.
And Rowan, you mentioned the last general election. It's widely purported that there'll be another one by the end of next year. What kind of impact do you think that will have on agents who, are already in a market that is perhaps challenging?
I think general elections it's just another time where people pause and wonder what's going on. So it just puts a freeze on volume. And for me, it doesn't particularly matter. I say for me, I don't mean for me in terms of my business. I just mean my opinion of the market. The price of property it's not necessarily what drives it, although it might drive people's determination to go and buy right now or wait until later. So there can be a volume difference, but it's volume. Volume is what knackers a market, is what knackers an estate agent. So if we are suddenly transacting on 25% less, then and you can't fill that hole, that's where agents will struggle through that period. And we don't yet know when it's coming. So we're kind of all trying to predict, is it going to be 8 months? Is it going to be 12 months? Is it going to be a sort of snap election in January? And we don't know yet. So there's going to be this sense of growing uncertainty going into the new year and then through the new year, as we're all just trying to work out which chess pieces are being played and trying to work out when this is all going to be launched on us.
Can I just explore that a little bit more? Because one of the things that we did recently, I mean, I don't know whether you guys know this, but home movers spend on average £43,000 a person, right, in terms of putting coffers into the economy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about taxation, I'm talking about spend with estate agents and conveyancers and sofas and fridges and freezers and bathrooms and kitchens and all of that kind of stuff. We recently calculated, so 90% fall in transactions in the last year. We worked that out to be something like £10 billion of the UK economy.
Yeah.
So there's that much less. So, I mean, if you were Rishi, would you do something about this now? So volume's an issue. How do we tackle it? It's a hard question.
I've always said that the property industry doesn't just sort of fund baggy suits and flash cars of estate agents. It funds funds carpenters, painters, decorators, greetings cards companies. I mean, it's all sorts that's built around the property industry. Mm. So when you slow down the property industry, there's a massive chunk comes off the economy, which is why I think they seem to be always keen to galvanise the property market when they need to have a boost in the economy. But I haven't really noticed anything. We just had 2 party conferences, right? There was nothing really that came out that looked like short-term benefits for the housing industry. There's lots of talk about long-term building projects, but there doesn't seem to be anything that feels like it's coming out that would, I'm not saying that a stamp duty change, for example, should be the way it goes, but when they bring in a stamp duty incentive, for example, or stamp duty holiday, that's always the thing that, I mean, for right or wrong, galvanizes the market. Mm-hmm. It was an absolute nightmare when they did that in 2020. Right through into March 21, that they then had to extend to June 21 because of that, the problem it actually caused in the marketplace then. So, but those sorts of things do, it boosts the market. We get the benefit of it, but then I think we're now having the kind of the fallout from that and the hangover from what was an overinflated market and an overbusy market, price wise, value wise, and properties going up, and then in the kind of the natural deflation there was always going to be anyway, if you didn't launch something in like the trust grenade in September that was a catalyst to it all.
Yeah. I've always thought a good idea would be giving stamp duty breaks to those that are downsizing.
Absolutely.
You've got my mum rattling around in a 3-bed detached house because she did an equity release 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Rather than equity release, if she'd have had an incentive to downsize, then she may have downsized. And a whole bunch of my mum's friends, she's 74, 75, whatever she is, all of my mum's friends have all equity released. Mother and father-in-law sitting in a detached 4-bed detached house. We need to free up the top end of the market, in my opinion. I live in a 3-bed semi. I'd really like to get to that next level, but I'm 45 times running out. In the next couple of years, I'm going to give up the ghost and just stay there and buy property abroad or something. It's these things that's stopping the housing market because I can't find the next house to go to. I'm your typical seller. I won't put my house on the market until I find something. I'm a classic sort of buyer/seller, even though I shouldn't be doing it that way. But there's just no stock available for me to move up to. And ironically, if I freed up my 3-bed semi, then there'd be people that would then put their house on the market. And you need that top end. I just think there's be a really good incentive to give a reduction to people that are downsizing in stamp duty or costs or whatever that might look like.
And you mentioned affordability being an issue. Sorry, Casey, I stopped for a second. But one of the things that we've done over the course of the last couple of weeks, I think it was for the FT or somebody, but we kind of calculated what the affordability of lettings is. And it's just, Shelter say if you're spending more than 35% of your net disposable income on rent, it's unaffordable. And every single region of the UK, bar the northeast, if you take the average disposable incomes and compare them with the lettings prices, they're spending way over 35%. I mean, in London, obviously we're comparing averages with averages, but it's 80% of disposable incomes. So the alternative, this private rental stuff is just completely unaffordable.
Yeah.
And allied to that, what we did was a study into seeing whether people would be better off renting or buying. Now, okay, we messed around with the figures a little bit and we said, right, okay, well, if people have a 20% deposit, if they can just muster a 20% deposit together, they're paying a 6% mortgage rate and they take that over 40 years. Every single one of those regions, they'd have a monthly saving that was huge compared to renting. So in London, it's over £1,000 a month. In the south and southeast, in the east of England, it's £500 a month.
Yeah.
And it's just, so what's your alternative? I mean, surely you're better off buying rather than
I think
renting.
but how do young people save 20% deposits, for
That's a valid
example?
point.
I mean, I could never have done it. And we got lucky and got lucky. We went into negative equity straight away, but we bought our house in 2007 with a 100% mortgage. And if we hadn't done it, we wouldn't have managed to get on the property ladder. And I'm not saying that we should bring back 100% mortgages, but we could afford the rent or we could afford a 100% mortgage. So we went for a 100% mortgage and we've done ourselves a favour. And I think, and obviously we've then had a life where we've stayed together and haven't got divorced and these things otherwise happen to people. That means they've had to sell during negative equity, and that's caused the problem. Some of the problems that they were during that financial crash. I mean, there was obviously compound factors there, but we've managed to get the benefit of it. But we would never, I don't know if we'd have managed to save 10% deposit. And in fact, when we were buying this house in 2000, and I was an agent, and my boss said, why don't you just wait? Because we all knew what was coming down the line. She said, if you just wait, you'll be able to get that house for 100 grand in a couple of months. And I said, yeah, but I can't save 10 grand unless you pay me more. So, but I think that's the problem. I mean, back then we were doing these sorts of models, but we weren't talking about saving 20% and then spreading the mortgage over 40 years. Back then we were talking about saving 10% and spreading it over 25 years. And this is what we've managed to get into, and it's only been 15, 20 years, but we've suddenly got this totally different attitude to what buying a house looks like for people coming into the market and getting on the ladder, that they are now having to basically mortgage themselves until they're well.
But that's because we've been helping the buyers the whole time.
I understand.
We've been fueling the market with the decisions made by government, generally speaking. Unpopular opinion, I think prices need to come down by 20%, 25%, because, and the only way you can do that is by building more houses. You're only going to do that is by relaxing planning permissions, which, although Liz Truss had a bit of a disaster, a bit of a nightmare, that was one of the things she did say she was going to do, and run a train through that. And that's one thing that I kind of went, let's have it, because we need more houses to then increase the supply, bring the prices down, and help those buyers. Because, talk about our kids, I don't know how my kids are going to afford, I'm going to have to retire rich and give them all the money, because that's the only way they're going to be able to afford to buy a house. Because it's down to me to help them buy a house, and that's not the right way around. It was down to me to buy my house, not my mum and dad. It's now down to me to buy their house as well, and that shouldn't be that way around. I don't think we need to build more houses. We need to see prices come down, not in a way that causes a crash and instability and job losses and all that kind of stuff. But I just think we're just too deep with helping the buyer the whole time.
Yeah, there's real term price changes as well, though, aren't there? Because so prices perhaps need to come down by 20%, or wages need to go up by a similar level. And so if actually prices hold or only come down a little bit, whilst wages sort of catch up over the next, I don't know how long it will take, 5-10 years probably. But there will be some evening out without necessarily having to take the legs out of the property market. But because I don't know if the property market really functions very well if things do go down by 20%. I mean, 20% is about the level of drop we had, I think, in 2009, right? It was about
Yeah,
20,
20,
22%,
Yeah.
25%. And, you know, parts of Suffolk where I was working, we lost 40% of value. So it was extreme. Some areas of the country are more extraordinary than others when this happens. And actually in a place like Oxford, where we then moved to, there really wasn't that much difference at all during the recession. So we look at all of these stats on a national level, but actually there's definitely regional variances.
Sure. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, the other problem that you mentioned to us, Rowan, beforehand was that the timescales involved in moving just remain to be mad. I say this all the time, but I remember I bought my first leasehold flat in 1994, and it took us 6 weeks to complete on it. You know, from sale agreed, bang, let's move in, kind of thing. You know, now that's an average of 4.1 months or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I said, what the hell do we do about that? Because it's sort of beginning to be unsustainable, isn't it? I don't know whether you agree.
It is, and you know, the point that you made earlier, Rowan, about the fact that it's not just a problem for the buyers and sellers and everybody in the chain; it's a problem for estate agents. You know, I don't think there's any other industry where there's so much outlaid upfront, usually without any payment made by anybody until completion. So, you know, what should agents be doing, do you think, to try and help bring down completion timescales?
I mean, that's a good question. I wonder if EXP actually has a better conversion in terms of your completion times. Because
statistically, I think we're about 120 odd days from new instruction to exchange.
New instruction to exchange.
I can't remember the exact stats.
or sale agreed to exchange.
Probably sale agreed to exchange, but the larger businesses that operate at a similar scale more like 150 days.
Yeah.
So we were like nearly a month shorter, and that's because the individual agents are self-employed. They're using conveyancers who are local to them. You know, there's a finger pointed at the factory conveyancers, let's call them, who offer a referral fee. I don't think personally that's a problem. I think more of a problem is other agents not putting chains together properly. I actually think the irony of agents chasing solicitors is a problem as well. And ironically, we had no sales progression when I ran Hatched because we were an online agent, and we had like an automated, you know, milestone tracker type thing, and our fall through rate was 20%. And then we brought in 3 sales progressors, and our fall through went down to 19%. So having sales progressors didn't speed up the sale. It didn't improve fall through rates.
Just added cost to your business.
Just added cost to my business. And ironically, now I speak to My Home Mover, whatever they're called now. I can never remember what they're called now. But you know, one of their things was, don't call us. We'll get the job done. And I know that's again unpopular, and people don't like My Home Mover for whatever reason. But I do think that conveyancers on another note should be putting their fees up as well. Because if the problem is, if the backlog is because they haven't got enough staff, then they need more staff, but then they need to put their fees up. And we need to accept that conveyancing should cost more and that estate agency should cost more. We need to be putting our fees up across the industry in everything that we do.
You've changed since you were at Hatched.
I have, yeah, completely changed my mindset altogether. Yes, indeed.
I mean, there is that stat, isn't there? Like conveyancers are doing double the work for the same amount of money that they were paid 5 years ago, or something stupid like that.
Is there? I've not seen that, but that wouldn't surprise me. And that's one of the reasons, one of the contributing factors to why it's taken so long to get sales through, because there's not enough people. There's not enough people because they're not making enough to employ more people.
I mean, certainly when I became an estate agent in 2005, and back then we were still putting 28 days on our sales memos and kind of expecting it. I mean, we would sort of think, oh, we probably won't do it in 28 days because searches take about that long. But it would be about 6 weeks, I think, on average back then. And then it sort of gradually moved to 2 months, and then 3 months felt okay. And I think there was I don't know whether it feels to me like it's still sort of 5.5 months going through. We've got one going through now. It's been 9 months that it's been going through. And in fact, actually, obviously, I've made a decision recently to merge my business, and part of that was because it was becoming too financially tight to predict that we could carry on going for many more months when transactions have just been so slow coming through. I mean, we went through, January to April with, I think, just like 3 or 4 transactions, and the costs don't stop as an agency. And then obviously they all started to turn through in June, July, and we sort of had a nice payday. But all that payday did was go and pay off all of the kind of the sort of hole of debt that we got into for 4 months. And I think that's the problem with agency, and that trying to we sort of split agency into that. It's all about helping the customer, but we as agents, business owner agents, we've got to sort of balance books and run businesses as well. And although you can't take your eye off the customer service and the diligence and the compliance side of things, you do still need sales to go through. But I think I'm not surprised that yours is a bit quicker because your agents are self-employed, because it's their money and it's their livelihood, and I hope, I just imagine they would be more focused on getting it through. And there is a little bit of cajoling and a little bit of help you can give to conveyancers, but I'm not sure that agents can provide the solution. To answer your question, I don't really think we can help the conveyancing market, apart from giving them well packaged memos and instructions in the first place, so they can go ahead and have the floor plans ready and everything else that's in the sales memo package that might go over to them in the first place, and you've got a complete chain that can start moving. But I don't know many agents that wouldn't provide that.
So Adam, what do you think that agents could do if there's not very much that we're saying they can necessarily do in terms of moving along the conveyancing process? Going back to your point about they need to be charging more, and Rowan, your point about there's no money coming in until the end of the transaction. What can agents be doing in your view to give benefit to vendors to kind of to push their fees up? And is there a way that agents could start to introduce upfront fees, or do you think that is completely, it's so kind of,
Upfront fees there'd have to be value there, whether that's photography. I mean, I think agents should be doing professional photography, presenter-led video tours. That's what we're seeing, and they're the agents that are probably the most successful. I think there's talk of pre-sale packs coming out. There's a few providers and suppliers out there that have sort of pitched me on pre-sale packs for vendors to pay sort of 395 quid or whatever it is. Searches get done, TA 6, 7, 10, all of that sort of stuff gets done up front. And if the searches expire, they'll then renew the searches at no extra cost. I mean, I think that's a really smart idea. I mean, it's basically HIPS reinvented, isn't it? I mean, they should have kept HIPS, in my opinion. And because it gave all that information to the buyer, I don't think there's anything, why should we not be transparent to the buyer about what they're buying? It's just crazy to not provide that information up front. But because it's not done by other businesses, then the agent who wants to do it feels under pressure because they've got to say to the client, oh, well, we do this, this and this. And they say, well, this agent's not going to do it. And so the agent who wants to do it feels like, so I think it needs to be mandated, that kind of thing, which is where HIPS was brilliant. And everybody had to do it. You had no choice. No one could skirt the rules. And, we hear of agencies who say, oh, we don't need to worry about the AML check. And we don't. I mean, there's no way that a house is getting through without an AML check. And that my agents say, well, they've done it, so why can't I? Say, well, we're responsible agents and we abide by the law. And so you do get agents who are skirting around the rules a little bit. In terms of adding value, there's little things that you can do, little levers. Let's say the photography, the videos, but WhatsApp groups. Having a dedicated agent, if it's a traditional high street agent, having a dedicated agent assigned to that customer's sort of property in that case, if you like. Creating WhatsApp groups, that's kind of what we're seeing as that next level service. I think if you're a traditional high street agent in a either a corporate or medium-sized business, they're not doing that. The 25, 30-year-old person who's been there for 5 or 6 years is not really that bothered about servicing that client after 6 o'clock on a Thursday evening or Sunday mornings or whatever. Because they're paid a salary to do a job between 9 and 6. And this is not me preaching about self-employed, but if those corporate entities and those bosses started saying, well, actually, let's give you some more flexible time, let's create WhatsApp groups, let's assign you a client, I think that would be adding value to the client journey, definitely. Just quickly on the time to go through, America is about 4 to 6 weeks for a sale to go through. But the agents do their own conveyancing, essentially. There's no conveyance in America. So they do their own contracts and they meet at the closing table. So that's why agents in America only sell like 5 houses a year, roughly, the average agent, because they do the entire, and so that's why they charge 6% as well.
Exactly, yeah.
But France, interesting, it's 5 months for a house sale to go through. They charge 4.5% to 5%. I don't think they do their own contracts. I think they've got notaries that do all that stuff. But yeah, so every country is different, and there are countries that have similar issues and problems to us. So I don't know how you get out of it. It's a difficult one, isn't it?
It doesn't have to be that way, though, does it? I think
it shouldn't be.
So the 10 billion that I mentioned earlier on is, I think estate agents are suffering to the tune of 800 million pounds over the course of this year versus last year, kind of thing. And I'm hearing that there's a few of them that are now loss making, even some of the big regionals and stuff like that. So it's not, it's not an isolated incident. Does there need to be less agents serving the marketplace then? I mean, is this a good thing for a state agency to get rid of some of the lower end agents, perhaps, who aren't doing a reasonable job at the minute, perhaps?
Comes back to fees again. Got to charge more. Got to charge more. You can't be. If you're losing money, you're not charging enough. That's the same with every business in the world. Doesn't matter whether it's a state agency or selling, chocolate bars. You've got to charge enough money to make a profit and provide the service that you need to provide to give them the experience they need to have. It's just down to commission.
I think part of the issue is that there are a lot of agents who only have experience of the market over the last 2 or 3 years, and they don't now necessarily know, and they're not all kind of running their own businesses. It's quite often employees within.
Yeah, I think agents that don't have skin in the game are this is a very broad brush statement to make, but they are part of the problem, because effectively they have a capacity to go out and say whatever they need to say to a vendor, and they can be very convincing in the way they say it. I won't say they'll be lying, but there's a little bit of disingenuousness in some of the pitches that they will make to encourage somebody to go on with them, because actually their job is to get 20 instructions a month, and that's their job. Like that, and it doesn't matter whether they sell, to be honest. They just their job in that business is to get the 20 instructions, and there'll be various sales courses they go on that helps them convey to a vendor all the reasons that they should believe them when they say we're the best agent for you. And actually, if they're going out and they are, I mean, there's all sorts of commentators that will say, and there's all sorts of sales trainers that say get your fees up. And I agree. I think we should try and be a little bit bolder on fee, but you can lose instructions on fee. And I just don't care what the commentators say when they say you shouldn't lose an instruction on fee. You haven't proven your value. I'm sorry, it's not true, because these buyers don't have to make a commitment. They don't have to. It doesn't. There's no. I don't know. I'm sort of losing my own track here, but there's nothing you can say really on the sofa that will tell people that you are worth 0.5% or a whole 1% more than that agent who is also showing them very, very similar looking photographs, very similar looking history of sales in the area, very similar looking, this is actually what we think it's worth, and actually I think maybe we can get you an extra 10,000 because I've got these several buyers and they just missed out on that one. It's all very believable. It's just too believable. So I think that unless, I don't know, there's not a way of, you can't cabal the industry. It's like literally it's illegal to have a cabal of raising fees. So it's just an open market and it's competitive. I think with models like with EXP, and there was something about your hybrid agents in the statistics we were looking at earlier. I'm not sure whether EXP counts as hybrid. I was going to ask what hybrid really meant, but I think you were saying that they're taking less market share out of the market this year, and I think that surprised me, because for me it feels like there's a lot more of them. But I did wonder whether actually when you become an EXP agent or a self-employed agent like that, or whether it's any of the other models are available. They don't have to, because they don't have to. They could in fact be like an American agent and go and do 6 sales a year and actually come out very well. They could earn a very good package out of that, and they certainly could do that if they just do 12 sales a year. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's part of it. They can, if they only need to do 12, they can be a bit more bullish on it, as long as they're getting into a volume of sort of market appraisals, so they're going to have a decent enough conversion out of it. But they don't need to worry if they're only converting at 25% if they're managing to get 1.75%, 2% fees out of it. And there's some agents out there getting 2.5%. So I think that the self-employed model or hybrid model, or whatever it might be, if it's that way, that can be lower volume, but base it on being higher service and therefore being able to charge a higher fee, and they could be, they can convince people less often, but actually get a result out of it. And that's why I think that model is functioning very, very well in the market.
Mm. It is. I mean, it's slightly distorted. So hybrid agents are, as far as we're concerned, agents who don't have high street branches. So EXP and Keller Williams and Remax and all of the people running sort of self-employed models would be included in that. Mm. And what's strange is that you're seeing the sort of fall in market share from Purple Bricks and Strike, really, that is distorting that. So that's why instructions are only 5.6%. And actually most of the people with or some of the people with self-employed businesses are all growing and they're all going in the opposite direction.
And I think that's because they're basing it on high service, which I think customers want. So customers want the high service, personal service, and sort of dedicated 360-degree estate agency that those models offer. That perhaps the strikes and the purple bricks don't. That's not what they're majoring on. That's not what their marketing is saying they actually offer.
But there's now a mismatch of other, some of the franchises are having personal agents, some of the traditional agents are now having personal agents. So it's kind of like a hub and spoke model where your tied office is this one and your area of responsibility is over here. Mm-hmm. So the market is it's a little bit strange at the minute. It's changing quite a bit.
And Adam, you've got obviously probably more experience than most in terms of different models of hybrid agency. What do you think is responsible for the drop in market share for brands like Purple Bricks and Strike? Is it consumer confidence? Are they not wanting to pay upfront fees? They're just dipping their toe in the water, putting their house on the market?
They've stopped spending money on TV and radio. I mean, the awareness of those, it just goes to show how difficult it is to maintain public awareness. I think if they were still spending 20, 30, 40 million, whatever it was, between all of them on TV adverts, then they'd still be either growing in market share or at least plateauing and staying at the same sort of levels. But, it was unsustainable 5-6 years ago. It's unsustainable now. And so they're relying on probably the data that they've got, the buyers that have a house to sell and pitching them. And there's going to be a market for DIY sellers. I mean, my old boss, Mick Rogers, 20 years ago said that he thought that about 7 to 11% of the market was private house sales. And so I think they will probably, look after those people that wanted to do private house sales, which was before the internet came along. Back of a newspaper, there was always 3 or 4 adverts saying privately for sale, 3-bed semi, And Mick, my old boss, used to estimate that it was about 7 to 11%. He didn't know, but it was around that. So I think they'll cater for that 7 to 11%, and that's fine. There's always going to be someone who wants a cheaper fee, but the sustainability of spending hundreds of millions of pounds a year on TV it's not sustainable, basically. So that's the real problem. I don't think I think there's a few consumers that will have long-term memories of poor service, but then every estate agency business has some level of poor service occasionally. That's just the nature of all businesses in the world. Again, it's someone's going to have a bad experience. So I don't think that's necessarily the case. Paying up front, not sure either. I think again, HIPS, if it's mandated, if people are used to paying up front, and people are paying up front with our agents because they're getting photography and 300, 400, 500 quid in some cases. Again, it's not the £1,200 up front. But yeah, so I think it's just the lack of spend, really. And you look at EXP, and again, it's not an EXP fest, but the agents are responsible for their own marketing. Just goes to show that hyper-local marketing is where it's at. And not every agent we've got is successful, but the successful ones are that hyper. We've not spent a single penny on TV, radio, above-the-line marketing. It's all down to our agents being in their marketplaces, in their communities, hyper-local marketing, becoming the brand, the personal brand, which again, when we talked about a minute ago about, I don't think the corporates, I don't think the traditional high streets, the independents will have somebody within their business that is either prepared to do that or they want them to do that, because it will take away from their brand if they start, shining the spotlight on the branch manager or the lister or the senior negotiator that's in that office. So there's a bit of a problem there, I think, as well.
The independents and the self-employed agents don't have that issue. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Just to wrap up, I'd be really interested to hear from each of you what you foresee happening in the market next year. Where do you think we'll be this time next year? Rowan, do you want to start?
I think that we're likely to see some further devaluation in property values, and that's going to, I don't know, I think it's a really hard question. We haven't had, I know we were talking about green shoots of recovery in September earlier. I didn't really feel it. I didn't feel there were green shoots. I'm starting to feel that there might be now coming into October, but September is normally one of these months that we kind of rely on as a marketplace, as an industry, to get us through the New Year period. So I think we're going to go into the New Year period in a bit of a struggle and in a tight place. What I think will happen, I don't know, I'm making predictions I shouldn't make now, but I reckon they're going to hold interest rates again at the next meeting. That's what I hope will happen, because I think if that happens, we will see a bit more confidence. I think at the moment there's this kind of sense that we maybe have a right to start to feel a bit more confident, but people aren't quite biting yet. I think if it holds again and we see the swap rates come down a bit further, and then we see the mortgage market compete a bit more on, rates. I know they come down under 6%, but they're still high. They really need to get down to something like 4.75%, 5%, I think, in terms of product rates, for buyers to start to feel, okay, this is a little bit more comfortable now. We should start looking, and then the volume will pick up. Personally, I don't think the volume's going to pick up until beyond the spring next year. So I think we're going to have a slow end of the year. We're going to have a slow first quarter, which isn't normally slow in a year. And then I know spring markets, it's an easy thing to say that the spring market will pick up, but I think it's going to be a late spring and summer market that then that's when we'll start to feel that things are getting a bit more buoyant again from an estate agency point of view.
Yeah. And Adam, would you agree?
I learned many years ago not to make any predictions because I got absolutely caned for that in the industry press a few years back. I don't know. I'm a little bit probably more nervous than Rowan, I would say. I just think that those interest rate rises haven't washed through the whole market yet. I think there's a lot of people coming off their fixed rate that are going to be surprised when they've got another £300 or £400 on their mortgage to spend. How's that going to impact the wider market? How's that going to impact the jobs? How's that going to impact demand for property? How's that then going to impact the supply? I just look at supply and demand. And if supply is too high and demand's too low, then we're heading for a downward spiral. And if there's more houses that are backing up on the market because they're not selling, then that's where the supply starts increasing, the demand starts lowering because people haven't got as much money in their pocket to either save for a deposit or pay for their mortgage over the next 6 to 12 months. So I'm nervous. I'm looking at those viewings per sale just going up every single month pretty much. That's my main metric I look at. It's on the ground, it's live, it's today. It's not 3 months after HMRC released their data of what properties have sold. It's what are we seeing on viewings per sale today, and that is up at 11.5, and if that goes up to 14, then I'm going to start. I'll be hitting the panic button. But it's an education for the clients. That's a big part of our role as estate agents is to make sure we're being very, very honest with the client, educating them, and But then the downside of that, you could end up chasing the market. In 2008, the first house came on at 325, and then you'd go to the next valuation and say, well, that's on at 325, you've got to put yours on at 310. The next one, that's on at 310, you've got to put yours at 295. And you saw this just undercutting of the market in 2008, 9, 10. And the buyers were just sitting there waiting, just going, right, just keep undercutting, brilliant. And if we start seeing that again can spiral very, very quickly.
And actually, I'm kind of living proof, because I have had these thoughts and thought, you know what, I'm weighing this up, and I think it's more sensible for me to kind of get out now while I can control it, rather than risk next year. I didn't want to take that risk as a business owner. I thought, you know what, I'm comfortable, and I'm gonna do this, and it's gonna be positive, and there's more funding behind it, and I can go out and do what I do as a sales director, which is selling stuff. But as a business owner, I was too nervous really to think, am we going to be secure enough by the summer next year, or by the end of next year, that actually there's still going to be a business there that's got any value to part with.
Prepare for the worst, hope for the best. You won't be disappointed then.
Yeah,
definitely.
And my view is it's a really, really, really difficult question to answer. And as an organisation, 20EA don't normally comment on forward-facing views. We leave that to other people to do in the marketplace. But from what I'm seeing, well, let's look at the facts for starters. We know there's going to be more than 1 million house sales in 2023 because we've already seen the sales agreed associated to those. And the really bad period of sales agreed was actually Q4 2022. It was after the mini budget.
Yeah.
That was the bit and unfortunately you saw transactions then go down 5-6 months after that in the middle of this year. So I think that's sort of gone. We've kind of got sensible government in place. Whether that changes if Keir Starmer and the Labour Party get elected is an interesting question. I still don't know what's going to happen in that story, but I think you're talking about at least 6 to 9 months of sluggishness, probably. But maybe returning into a normal market is the right way to call that. We're not going to be far off 2019, even though I accept your argument that 2019 probably wasn't a normal year. I don't think prices, one industry commentator had them dropping by 35%. I really don't think that we're going to see that. There's so much which is different from the market today versus the global financial crisis that we spoke about earlier. People's deposits are much higher, equity is much higher. There is some stability around the marketplace, and I think what's also happening is that we're 4.3 million homes short in the UK until somebody addresses that problem. And it's not the government scratching around. Yes, Rishi Sunak said, right, okay, well, we've hit our target. We've done 1 million new homes in the course of this parliament. Well, that 1 million new homes is 250,000 a year over 5 years. Is nowhere near enough. The government's own targets themselves say that they need to build at least 300,000. So prices, even if they do go down, and they are going down by low single digits, maybe up to 10%. They're not going to go down for very long because there's a massive shortage of supply, marketplace supply. So I'm actually slightly more bullish. I think if interest rates hold, we're looking at a period of sluggishness which we will probably start recovering from in spring or summer of next year. I think beyond 2024, things still look buoyant for prices because of the fact that there's just there's a massive shortage of housing in the economy. And I think what's happening on the letting side of things, we can't build enough properties in terms of the build to rent. So what some firms are doing now is they're starting to build lettings books by buying to rent, and that's causing more sales within the market happening at the same time. So I think it's a complex picture, very difficult to predict. But in summary, I think we're looking at low single digit falls, maybe south of 10% in terms of house prices falling across the piece, I think. And I think we will start to see demand recover. I think the Bank of England have to do something about interest rates come sort of the back end of this year with when we get into more stability, which we're just starting to see now.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone. It's been a really interesting discussion, and we'll wrap that up.
Brilliant.
Thank you.